Good evening. Good evening and welcome to tonight's debate with the candidates for Governor of Oregon. I'm Linda Lynch. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. The League is a nonpartisan political organization. We encourage informed and active participation in government. We work to increase understanding of public policy issues. And we know that if you're here tonight, you share our mission. I want to thank the League members who've been here working and volunteering tonight. I also want to thank our partners in presenting this debate tonight. The candidates, of course, who I'll introduce in a minute, and our partners, the League of Women Voters of Oregon and Oregon Public Broadcasting. Churchill High School and Eugene School District staff, and especially we want to thank Churchill's AP Government and National Honor Society students. Thank you, everybody. And now please welcome the candidates for governor. Governor Kate Brown, Dr. Bud Pierce, Mr. Cliff Thomason, and our host and moderator, Dave Miller.
I'm Dave Miller. Welcome to a special edition of Think Out Loud on OPB and KLCC, a debate with the three major party candidates running for Oregon governor. We are coming to you today from Winston Churchill High School in Eugene in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Oregon and the League of Women Voters of Lane County. I'm joined by the Democratic incumbent, Kate Brown, her Republican challenger, Bud Pierce, an oncologist from Salem, and independent party challenger, Cliff Thomason, a real estate agent turned hemp farmer from Grants Pass. They are all running to fill what would have been the last 2 years of John Kitzhaber's fourth term. Kitzhaber resigned in February of last year. As always for our Think Out Loud debates, we don't have buzzers or opening or closing statements or exact timing, but we do strive to ensure equal time for all of our candidates, and we'll do that tonight as well. To our audience here at the high school, as I mentioned just before we went live, please withhold your applause until the end of the hour. Before the show, we went to do an online three-sided die virtual roll to figure out who would get this first question. It goes first to Cliff Thomason. What is your top priority for the 2017 legislature?
The top priority for the legislature would to be put together a construction package where we can build affordable housing throughout Oregon. My plan calls for building 100,000 units over the next 6 years because we have a real shortage of affordable housing units, and that would be the first thing I would tackle.
Bud Pierce, your top priority for the session.
So the top priority of the session will be to come up with a budget that works. I feel that the ballot measure 97 may well fail, and we therefore face the reality that if we continue ongoing government processes, that we face a budget deficit. The actual increase in the general fund's revenue is from about $19 to $20.6 billion, so it's actually not a decrease. So we're going to have to come up with a package of agency reforms, spending priorities, so that we can learn to live within the generous increase in the budget that the citizens of Oregon are going to be giving us.
We're going to hear more about Measure 97 and more about housing as we go. Governor Brown, your top priority for this coming session?
Thank you so much, Dave, and it's such a delight to be here at Churchill High School and delighted to see so many students in the audience. My top priority for the 2017 session is to work with my legislative colleagues and officials around the state of Oregon to invest in our roads and our bridges and mass transit. It's absolutely imperative that people can get to work safely, that folks can get to school efficiently and safely, and that we can get products to market in an effective manner.
Cliff Thomason, what would the must-haves be for a transportation bill? This is something that legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle are talking about this year and talked about last year as well.
The must-have is funding. That's that's the big gorilla in the room, is where we're going to get the money, for this. And I think that, it's time that we look at other ways of raising revenue outside of Measure 97.
And outside of the gas tax?
Well, no, because the gas tax goes to roads, and so I would favor increasing gas tax in order to fund transportation, because that's where it goes.
What do you want to spend that gas tax money on, though? What are your priorities, and how do you want lawmakers to decide what projects to actually include in the big bill?
Governor Brown talks about having a 14-day readiness, package ready in the event of a catastrophic event. But what we don't have in place is, centers, placed throughout the state for the event of when we have a Cascadia subduction zone event happening. And I think that's really important. We work a lot toward our bridges and our roads and even our buildings to be ready for any type of earthquake, but we don't have a readiness plan, so I think that needs to be tied into it. But making 100% sure that we have the infrastructure up and down the I-5 corridor and a lot of the east-west corridors as well, so that in the event when that happens, we're prepared, and so they must be all ready and meet those standards that are necessary.
But here's the standard model for a big bill like this, is everybody in every corner gets a little bit of something, and then everybody is more or less on the same page in terms of saying, hey, well, I got this bridge, I got this road for my folks. How would you prioritize transportation spending? What should we actually spend this money on if indeed it's going to happen?
I think this is where you'd really like to have great technical expertise from your Department of Transportation with the right leadership that looks at priorities for the state, and the priorities have to be move goods and services and to move people. So it comes down to a bit of a technical analysis. The second thing you're really looking at, obviously, is public safety. You have to, if you have dangerous situations in terms of needing to revamp or replace or support, you have to do that. But again, I really believe that you have to look at what makes sense for the state as a whole, create a priority list just like we did with the Oregon Health Plan and prioritizing services, and take that approach and then tell people that we're coming to help them as we and to serve them as the amount of money becomes available for the project.
Kate Brown, would you take a different approach than your competitors?
Well, I think we need to do three things in terms of our investing in our roads and bridges and mass transit. And we've had a transportation visioning panel held meetings throughout the state, and we now have a great joint legislative committee, Senator Lee Byer and Representative Catty McEwen. And there are three things that Oregonians are telling us that they want to invest in. Number one, reducing congestion, mind-numbing congestion that's throughout the state, that we are investing in mass transit. I had the incredible opportunity in one of my last visits to Eugene to be on BRT, bus rapid transit, a very cost-effective method of mass transit. My understanding is over 50% of the rides on BRT are related to the University of Oregon, which is a good thing. And then lastly, as Cliff mentioned, seismic retrofitting. We have 135 bridges on the coast. About 100 of them would be either severely damaged or destroyed completely in an earthquake event. And it's absolutely imperative that we do the seismic retrofitting we need on our roads and bridges to be able to maintain our transportation infrastructure. But we also have to prepare for an event and have alternative transportation routes. And that means investing in Highway 97, which would be an alternative route in the event of a Cascadia event.
Briefly on this question, Governor Brown, unless Democrats pick up more seats in the legislature, you would need Republican votes to pass an increase in the gas tax. That didn't happen last year, largely because of the Clean Fuels Law and Republican opposition to it. At the last minute, you tried to work out some kind of tweaks to that law. That didn't happen. This coming session, would you agree to tweaks to that older law from last year in return for a passed transportation bill?
Absolutely not. I think we need...
No tweaks whatsoever?
No. I think we need both clean air and investment in our roads and bridges. And if the petroleum industry disagreed with that analysis, they should have put the Clean Fuels Bill on the ballot for Oregonians to decide. They chose not to spend the resources because they know that Oregonians want clean air to breathe, and we also need to invest in our roads and bridges.
The Oregon Health Authority is asking for a 56% funding increase this biennium, nearly $1 billion to cover the state's new portion of expanded Medicaid coverage. If there's not enough money for that kind of a budget increase, I'm curious what all three of you would want to do if you had to cut costs. Would you rather reduce the number of people on the Medicaid rolls, on the Oregon Health Plan rolls, roll back some part of that expansion, or reduce what's covered under the Oregon Health Plan? Cliff Thomason first.
Well, we have a lot of issues. You know, so much of Oregon's budget is tied to different cycles that we don't have any control of. I think it's time, as Oregonians, we have a mature discussion, you know, about going toward the sales tax. You know, something that is generally funded, that can provide us stable funding year after year after year. We can do that coupling it with property tax reduction or elimination and, you know, with corporate tax code overhaul. But we need to be doing that in a manner that affects all of Oregon and helps the Oregon budget. We are one of only 4 states in the United States that does not have a sales tax. But yet our budgetary cycle goes like this every time because we don't have the consistent funding. If we ever want to do tuition-free colleges, you know, if we want to do single-payer health care, if we want to give Oregonians everything that they need, you know, and deserve, then we need to do that. We need to have that honest discussion and move that forward.
What would you tell Oregon voters who I think 10 times have said no to a sales tax? Why would the 11th time be different?
Because I'm asking them.
And briefly, what would you say to them?
Well, you know, because, you know, I think we've had such an influx over the years, the last 20 years, of people coming from other states. They didn't move here because we didn't have a sales tax or they didn't have to pump their own gas. They came here for a quality of life that is eroding on a biennial basis because we don't have the forecast planning available to us that other states do with having a sales tax.
Before I move on to the other candidates, back to the original question here. Without new revenue that you're talking about through a sales tax, would you rather reduce the rolls of the Oregon Health Plan or reduce what's covered under OHP?
I'd rather choose neither. But,
Okay.
you know,
Kate Brown, your answer to that basic either-or question.
Sure. So I'm coming from the perspective of a lawyer who represented clients in the foster care system, parents who had their children removed because of domestic violence or because of drugs and alcohol. And one client that I represented, her children had been removed from her, and she wouldn't come see me, and she wouldn't participate in services. And I couldn't figure out why. Well, finally, I was able to pull it out of her why she wasn't feeling comfortable going out in public. She didn't have any teeth. And it was about that time that the Oregon Health Plan included dental care, denture care, so she could get teeth and go out in public and smile, and more importantly, work to get her children back. So we have recently added 400,000 Oregonians to the Oregon Health Plan. I am not willing to cut them off. I am not willing to reduce their services. So I'm obviously supporting ballot measure 97 to pay for the $880 million in cost. And if that fails, working with stakeholders on an alternative proposal that will ensure that every Oregonian has access to health care in this state. We've made so much progress. 94% of our adults are covered. 98% of our children are covered. I am not willing to go backwards.
Dr. Pierce, your two competitors have both basically said neither in response to my question. Do you have a different answer?
So I'm a cancer doctor, and I have taken care of uninsured patients for years now. We always take care of every patient that requires care, needs care as a moral imperative. I'm not willing to have one person lose insurance. I know that the social determinants of health, to be a healthy person, is to have a job and then have access to basic health care. The governor has applied for an additional $2 billion grant, which would be $400 million a year. Hopefully we'll get that to supplement funding. I remain convinced that by increasing the internal efficiency of government operations, that the money can be found. That is poo-pooed by people in government, but private business does it and can do it.
On the scale that we're talking about here,
On the scale that we're talking
billions of dollars.
On the scale that we're talking about, I believe that it can be done. I do believe it can be done. And we're going to propose a budget soon that talks about covering some of that. I do believe the internal efficiencies the money is there. I would say that one of the reasons we have a hard time funding healthcare now is we used to have 4 payment mechanisms: private, Medicare, Medicaid, philanthropy. It wasn't cost sharing. We've given up philanthropy. What I would do if that was a scenario, I wouldn't cut a single person. I would reduce the level of services, and I would build in an incentive system to try to get people to give charitable care again on top of reduced benefits, so people would have a whole system.
If you're just tuning in, I'm Dave Miller. This is a special broadcast of Think Out Loud, a gubernatorial debate in front of an audience in Eugene. We're talking with the 3 major party candidates for governor: the Republican Bud Pierce, the Democrat Kate Brown, and the Independent Cliff Thomasson. I'd like to turn to the issue of domestic violence. Bud Pierce, when this came up in last week's debate, he said that, quote, "a woman that has a great education and training and a great job is not susceptible to this kind of abuse." You have repeatedly apologized for that remark, saying that you were completely wrong. Given that a recent report from the Women's Foundation of Oregon found that between 700,000 and 1 million women and girls in Oregon have experienced either domestic violence or sexual assault, I'd like to hear from all of you, starting with you, Dr. Pierce, about what steps you take not to respond to this violence after it happens, but to prevent it in the first place.
So this is here again. Anybody who's out there who's experienced domestic violence, if my comments cause you any pain, suffering, or agony, completely apologize. This is political debate. It's not made to hurt anyone. It's not made to damage anyone. And I take full responsibility and ownership of what I said. And again, I apologize. In terms of what we can do, it's a cultural imperative. And it really is going to take society to change the way they view allowing people to abuse or harm other people all along the way. So what we have to do is we have to use our social institutions, family. Family has to look out for their children, assuming the family is a good family. If they start seeing abusive or violent behavior, our schools have to start recognizing that and really having zero tolerance and right away start saying that this isn't acceptable. Our organizations, our service organizations, it's a cultural change where we say we're not going to allow people to develop into abusive people. Abusive people are people that believe it's okay to harm other people, to either do abuse to them or violence. So that's an imperative that we have to do from a cultural point of view. In terms of other preventive measures, I think we just need a lot of work on the science of it, really, because I don't think we understand the biology of why people can come from solid families, develop that pattern of behavior. And in other cases, it seems to be linked maybe to a bad environment, but a bad environment doesn't explain, because there are a lot of people from a bad environment who don't abuse. So I think it's a cultural training imperative, a zero tolerance. There is a community that when people move into the community, they get a letter saying, we do not allow abuse of people in our neighborhood, and if it happens, we're coming to talk to you about it. So I think that's what we have to do.
Governor Brown, what can you do or government do to prevent domestic violence?
First of all, thank you, Dr. Pierce, for your apology. I appreciate that. But I will really leave this up to the 1 million girls and women in this state that have been impacted by domestic violence or sexual assault, like I have, to determine whether you want someone who just spent the weekend learning about this issue or has been investing her time, energy, and resources in increasing penalties and making sure there were more resources available for domestic violence shelters and services. Moving forward, I think it's absolutely critical that we put more dollars on the table. I don't think the free market is going to solve this problem. We put more dollars on the table to build more shelter services and make sure that we have a safety net in this state for our girls and young women and women of all ages.
Are you implying that Bud Pierce shouldn't be governor because of his lack of awareness of this issue?
No, I think it's up to the girls and women of this state to determine whether he has the skills to be able to deliver the services needed in an appropriate way.
Cliff Thomasson, what's your take on what it would take to reduce domestic violence in Oregon?
You know, as a court-appointed special advocate for the state of Oregon and the foster care system, myself and hundreds of other volunteers see on a daily basis the results of domestic violence. And it's not a pretty picture. So what we have, you know, as root causes in so many of these cases is despair, pressure, and stress of the economic instability or substance abuse. And those are the things that we have to look at, you know, at Oregon at resolving. a lot of the economic instability or people are at or just below the poverty line. We're not doing enough in Oregon to bring these people out of that level. We are de-incentivizing people from rising up out of that, and it's causing the stress and pressure that sometimes leads to this type of violence. As far as the substance abuse, we have no pharmaceutical reform, even on the books, nothing going forward, but yet doctors across the state are dispensing or prescribing synthetic heroin at levels that makes it seem like we're filling a bottomless Pez dispenser. And it's wrong, because last year in Oregon, more people died of opioid deaths than traffic fatalities. And that doesn't send a clear signal what's wrong in this state, then I don't know what does. But we need pharmaceutical reform, we need better jobs, better opportunities, especially in rural Oregon, to move the state forward and help mitigate some of that risk of domestic violence, because it happens to everyone. And the children in this state should not be put in that position and be put at risk.
I'll move on to climate change. Considering the effects of climate change in Oregon and globally, including drought and forest fires, rising sea levels, more severe storms, shifts in habitat, the list goes on. Governor Brown, first, what new policies are you considering to deal with climate change at the state level?
What I love about Oregonians is that we want to preserve the beauty and bounty of Oregon, not just for this generation, but for future generations. As you know, we passed the low carbon fuel standard, reducing the carbon intensity. We have also passed the nation's first coal to clean, intentionally moving Oregon off of coal-generated electricity by 2030. Moving forward, a couple of things. Number one, I will use my tools as an executive to reduce energy consumption by buildings. They consume both residential and commercial, consume over 40% of our electricity. Secondly, DEQ's got a work group happening around carbon pricing. We'll certainly take a look at the recommendations on that and how we can move forward. Thirdly, both Department of Forestry and Water Resources are underfunded. It's really hard for them to do for example, Department of Forestry, the thinning and maintenance work on our forests that we need to do to prevent future devastating fires, because more than 50% of their budget is going into currently firefighting. So the last thing, I mentioned transportation package. What is most important that we do in our transportation package is develop our electric vehicle infrastructure, particularly ensuring that underserved communities have access to EV vehicles. And I'm looking forward to the proposals that are being worked on right now that we can implement in the 2017 session.
But Pierce, where does climate change rank in your list of priorities?
Climate change is important. The National Academy of Sciences states that man's production of carbon is impacting climate, and we should believe the recommendations. I actually read the summary statement. There's a push to doing something. There isn't a all-out urgency or emergency in their writings. There's a variable expression in the literature. So what we have to do are things that make sense for Oregonians, that make sense for society, and keep a rational head around it. We don't need to truck in ethanol corn ethanol from the Midwest and blend it with our fuels and give tax credits and tax breaks to certain groups. And then in order to create low carbon fuel, there's plenty of research that shows that's going to have zero to no effect on overall climate change. And it costs Oregonians hundreds of dollars a year. The no coal plan was actually crafted behind doors. PUC didn't like it. Again, it's not clear that you benefit yourself by artificially shutting off a coal plant rather than reducing use and phasing in wind and solar. Again, you can do it in a rational way, or you can do it in a way that benefits people that you're connected to. Again, that's costing hundreds of dollars a year.
Those are policies you don't like. What are policies that you do like?
I like policies, again, that improve transportation systems so you don't idle away and waste fuel. I like improving the infrastructure grid. I like improving insulation. I like advancing ideas like cross-laminate timber and cross-laminate technology to replace skyscrapers with from metal and concrete to make it out of wood. I like demanding more efficiency and lower carbon production out of new products, and such as gas-electric hybrids. I think you take a cool head about it and do not bankrupt Oregonians in an idea that is going to change climate very much from what Oregon does. What happens in China counts a lot more than what happens in Oregon. But what we need to do is develop new technology, new forms of energy that the world can afford, and not unaffordable solutions, and look at the whole environment of the world as a whole, rather than focusing solely on Oregon and driving the cost of living up so high that Oregonians can't live here.
Cliff Thomason on climate change.
I applaud a lot of the things that have been done. I just don't like the methodology. So, talking with clean to coal, I appreciate that. But it's a lot like being the first person to buy a Prius 20 years ago. You end up paying the cost for it, and that's the part I don't like. Had we included hydroelectric, as a renewable, resource, then we wouldn't have been seeing an increase in our power bills, which is ultimately what's going to happen. But I do, believe that we as a state should do everything we can, to make not only Oregon but the world, a much better and safer place. On the clean fuels, the same thing. Price at the pump's going up. Had I been governor, I would have, found a way to request the importation of hundreds of thousands of pounds of seed that we can grow, specifically hemp seed, so we can grow and have the resources of the seed for the biofuels and the ethanol, and so we can give our processors the means in which to make that happen, so we as the citizens of Oregon don't have to pay the price at the pump. But I 100% agree with where we're going in addressing not only climate change, but making it a better environment across the world.
Before we go to a first break, I'm going to ask you a series of 4 quick questions. Please, if you can, answer with just a yes or a no. Kate Brown first. In previous debates, Governor, you and Dr. Pierce have disagreed as to whether it be legally possible to change anything about the public employees' retirement system benefits for current employees. But yes or no, would you be willing to reduce future retirement benefits as a way to save money?
I'm willing to look at all options that are legally viable and also make sure that result in significant financial savings.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes, but here's yes or no.
Yes.
Cliff Thomason?
Yes.
Okay. Last year, this is for you first, Cliff Thomason. Last year, Lane County's coordinated care organization, Trillium Community Health Plan, was sold to a for-profit company, making one of 6 CCOs that are now privately owned. Yes or no, should for-profit corporations be allowed to manage health services for low-income and disabled people under the Oregon Health Plan?
Yes.
No.
Governor Brown?
No.
Okay, our listener, Stephanie Gonzalez, wrote that our current state forest laws create a, quote, clear-cut for kids dynamic. She asks, would you detach school funding from logging some of our last old-growth forests? But here's first.
Yes.
Kate Brown?
Yes.
Cliff Thomason?
Yes.
Finally, the state's prison facility for women, Coffee Creek, is over capacity right now. Yes or no, Kate Brown first. Do you support reopening the Oregon State Penitentiary minimum facility for women to relieve overcrowding at Coffee Creek?
We need to make sure that we have gender-appropriate services for our women adults in custody.
Yes or no, open OSP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Cliff Thomason?
Yes.
We have to take a quick break. Coming up, we're going to hear much more about housing, about PERS, about marijuana, and some other quick questions. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Think Out Loud on OPB and on KLCC. I'm Dave Miller. We are talking to the 3 major party candidates running for Oregon Governor. Cliff Thomason from the Independent Party, the Democratic incumbent Kate Brown, and the Republican Bud Pierce. We're coming to you from Churchill High School in Eugene in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Oregon and the League of Women Voters of Lane County. Let's turn to affordable housing. Bud Pierce first, what should happen at the state level in terms of affordable housing?
Help create housing that's affordable to build. The components of the cost of building housing are the cost of the land. We have to come up with cheaper land prices. The fees charged by the state and the cities, we have to lower those. And the design build requirements. In other words, what are all the requirements to put into the build? Currently, a lot of the affordable housing that is being built at astronomical prices, up to $500 a square foot. In some cases even for remodel, and then they're heavily subsidized. The problem with that approach is the few hundred people that can get those units get a great price because it's subsidized, but you have to come up with affordable build. A
A lot of this happens at the city level. What could you do at the state level to change what you're talking about?
Well, so I think there has to be some flexibility on land use. We have to get to the point where we have land that's available that's not so costly, and that certainly could be done by allowing more flexibility at the land use planning, and maybe allow the counties to make more decisions on making land more affordable. And again, I do think our city and county brethren and sisters need to relax some of those design build standards and their fees. Otherwise, we will not have affordably built housing.
Kate Brown, would you support what Bud Pierce was just talking about in terms of giving more local control, more county control to questions, for example, about urban growth boundaries?
Well, last session we passed a series of bills to give local communities more tools to build affordable units. And one of those tools was a very targeted, focused expansion of the urban growth boundary, a pilot project in one urban community and one rural community. I supported that legislation because it was part of the package, but I don't think expanding our urban growth boundary solves the problem. I think it causes more challenges in general. I think what we need to do and what we have done, because I believe that everyone deserves a safe and stable place to call home. And last year in Oregon Public Schools, we had 20,000 children who didn't have a roof over their heads during the school year at some point. I find that untenable, that our school children don't have a place to do their homework, a dry place to read at night, a place to have dinner. So we invested in a $70 million package to build affordable units and prevent homelessness, and also provide foreclosure assistance targeted toward underserved communities across the state. And then I just mentioned we provided additional tools for local jurisdictions to build more affordable units. Moving forward, as your governor, I will fight to make sure there's more dollars on the table to build affordable units, and make sure that renters can't get evicted for no cause whatsoever. And then I believe we need other options on the table. What worked last session, as stakeholders came around a table and came up with a package of bills that will expand access to affordable housing. I'm hoping we can do the same in 17.
Cliff Thomason, your plan to take care of affordable housing?
Well, the $70 million you mentioned, builds less than 1,000 units. We're hundreds of thousands of units short of where we need to be to have affordable housing. You've got 1% vacancy rate in Bend, you've got a 0.5% vacancy rate in Portland. It's really a crisis. In 2008, when the recession hit, the construction stopped, but our population grew. And so now we see in places like Portland, one-bedroom apartments, median prices of $1,200. And what we do as a state is start looking at the symptoms of the problem, whether not the problem itself. So what they did last year, we're talking about raising minimum wages. Well, I got to tell you, if your apartment's $600 a month, $10 an hour works all day long. And so we keep exacerbating the problem, because as we increase starting wages, we increase cost of living, we increase the cost of housing. So under my plan, I would propose subsidizing $20 of the first $100 of construction, or $20 per square foot on the first 500 square feet of construction, with a guaranteed, set rate of $600 and $800 a month for 1 and 2 bedroom homes, until we can build our way out of this. By doing this and having a construction plan, we'd also create tens of thousands of family wage jobs throughout the state, and I think we need to build our way out of it.
Sticking with you, Cliff Thomas, and moving on to education. Oregon has one of the lowest high school graduation rates in the country, and students have less total class time in Oregon than in many other states. But money alone does not account for the situation we find ourselves in. We are, according to Governing Magazine, close to the middle of the pack, 32nd out of 50 states when it comes to funding levels. So setting money aside for the time being, what else do you think is wrong with Oregon education?
Well, that's a lot. The state tends to throw a broad blanket over most policies throughout the state, but I got to tell you, the school district in this area is different than the school district in Portland. It's different than the school district in Bend. So we need to have more local control and decision making, everything from curriculum to classroom sizes and other things, so we can help craft better solutions on a local level.
You want to get rid of statewide standards that go statewide?
On some of them, yeah, absolutely, because I think that it's important that different regions, we have this urban-rural divide, and not everyone teaches or learns in the same way. But one of the things that's suggested as a stopgap measure is that we start making sure by the end of the sophomore year, every student will take and pass the GED, the General Education Diploma. And then they can attain a high school diploma in another 2 years, sort of like what we have with associate's and bachelor's degree in school. But what that does, it gives them the tools and resources so they can go get a job, they can join the military, they can go to higher education. Because sometimes high schools don't fit what they want. But with that GED, they're going to go enroll into community college and find other sources of education. So I think it gives a sense of accomplishment halfway through to where they can finish up with an accomplishment and a high school diploma at the end.
But here's, what do you think is wrong with Oregon's public education system that cannot be fixed with more money?
So this governor who's sitting next to me, I know she desires to have a great educational system for Oregon. She's been at it for about 25 years, and we find ourselves with a failing K-12 system. So what we need to do is the following. The most important thing that a school can do for a child is having a motivated, trained teacher leader in front of the students. That's the absolute most important thing. That's what our chalkboard project is about. And when you look at high-performing schools, whether or not they're private or public or charter, they generally have a great teacher leader in front of the students who can motivate and who can inspire. There's also usually a principal who stands by that teacher, and if you can, you get the parents involved, and if the parents can't get involved, at least the principal's in support of the teacher. Second thing is...
If I could just stop you there, because I should point out to remind folks, we're talking in a high school right now. Are you saying that we don't right now have enough great teachers in Oregon and you have a plan to get more of them?
I believe that we have many good teachers, but we don't have all the teachers that we need to have that can be leaders and motivators in the classroom. They know their topic, but I do think that improvement in leadership training, like the chalkboard project, and giving feedback to teachers who are in the classroom is the key. It's the leadership in the classroom. That is key to improving the educational system. The other thing I'd say is that we need to have the tracks that students can go along. There's the track to go to the university and the career technical track. We need to develop that earlier, let students choose which direction they want to go in, and then make it rigorous so that as they do the work when they're 12, 14, 16, 18 years of age, that work counts toward their ultimate career decisions.
Kate Brown, what would you do to fix the K-12 system that does not rely on more money?
Well, first of all, I will not apologize for my 25 years of service working hard to make sure that all of our Oregon families thrive. And I'm so pleased about the work we've been able to do in the last 20 months, investing in early childhood education so that 3- and 4-year-olds show up to kindergarten ready to learn, all-day kindergarten for the first time ever in Oregon's history, building STEM into our local middle schools and our local high schools. We doubled our funding for career and technical education and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. I was able to tour the Arts and Technology Magnet at Jefferson Middle School here in Eugene. Was so impressed with what the students are doing, building holograms off of iPads. It was truly extraordinary. Then, of course, working to remove barriers so our students can attend community college and university and not end up with a pile of debt. But there's much more work we can do. The first thing that we can do is to create truly a seamless system of education from cradle to career that will improve educational outcomes for all of our students. That's in the works. Secondly, making sure that we make sure all of our students graduate from high school with a plan for their future. This is a personal issue for me. My stepson, he blew out of high school after his second year. We were really fortunate because we had the tools and the resources to help him get his GED. The good news is he is thriving, but not all families have the resources and tools to follow through and completion. That's why I brought on Colt Gill, stolen from Bethel School District, because he can lead this discussion about how we improve our high school graduation rates. And then lastly, I agree that our teachers need additional tools. They need professional development and coaching. That's why we're working with the Chalkboard Project and have created the Council on Educator Advancement so that our educators will have access to the coaching and the professional development they need to be successful in the classroom.
Cliff Thomason, the PERS board suggested recently that one way to raise more money for our underfunded pension system might be to issue $20 billion in bonds and then to use the borrowed money to earn interest when invested, hoping that that could actually pay some of the state's obligation for current and future retirees. What do you make of this plan, and would you support it as governor?
You know, I believe all options are on the table, and I appreciate them for coming up with one option. You know, one of the things we talked about is really going to the toolbox and giving the PERS Investment Council the opportunity, the tools to meet the demand of the 7.5% return, because currently they're sort of hamstrung and can only follow the same ebbs and flows as we see on Wall Street, and the returns are only 2.5%. So I think that it's important we look at all options, like, you know, the bonding measure, but really giving the resources to the people who are making those investments. You know, I think a lot of the things, you know, we do as a government is to look within our own departments and find ways, you know, and find solutions. I remarked about in 2005, Tim Kuligowski wanted more funding for Oregon State Police. And rather than going to the taxpayers, he went to, you know, other departments. And with the lottery department, he tasked them with raising over $100 million, and now we're a $1 billion industry. So you can give resources and tools within the departments to make the program work. If to give them the opportunity, they will be successful.
Governor Brown, do you support this bonding plan?
I think it is a tool, and we need to use it as an option on the table. I actually agree with Cliff. I think we need to keep that on the table, and then we need to make sure that we provide the Oregon Investment Council, the council that oversees our PERS investments, with greater tools and flexibility to increase returns on our PERS investments. The other two criteria I would use would be making sure that an option is legally viable, that it would pass muster with the courts, and secondly, that it would result in significant financial savings. So as long as it meets those criteria, I'm supportive. My opponent, Dr. Pierce, has a number of proposals, but when I hear his proposals, I hear lawsuit, 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 back on the hamster wheel of litigation.
Let's hear the actual proposals, now that we've heard what you think the proposals are.
So this PERS crisis, and it's beyond the moral crisis described by the PERS board, is not a gift of Governor Brown's 25 years of service to the state of Oregon, not being able to take that on in any meaningful way. And we won't go into why we think that is. But to borrow your way out of debt never works. So if you have a debt and you want to borrow more money, we kind of tried that in the mortgage crisis. You just take out seconds and keep trying to pay your debt off. That's a terrible idea. You got to pay back the interest on the bond, and then you have to invest and get a higher return. The 10-year U.S. bond rate's about 1.5%. If we get 3% going forward on our investments, we'll be doing good. There are no superstar managers who can do that. If you believe that, you don't understand the fundamentals of investing. In terms of what we are allowed to do in this situation is a few things. One is we can do nothing about people retired. We do nothing about the people that are in the PERS system right now. But what you can do is you can look at the people that haven't yet retired and look at how their final benefits are calculated. You can take 5 years instead of 3 years for final calculation of salary. You can look at things like spiking, where you don't put in retirement, you don't put in sick leave, you don't put in vacation time, you don't put in other salary money to determine your final pay. You can look at this ruinous money match system that was set up where you match 50-50 state money with the employee's money by an annuity, which is changing that lump sum into a cash payment. The state company pays 7 or 8%, probably don't need to pay more than 3%. Finally, on average in this country, when there's a PERS system, the employer is responsible for about 78% of the PERS bill that year, and the employee is responsible for about 22%. So what that would mean out of our true $4 billion PERS bill, it's only shortened to 2.8 because the system prevents a true cost from phasing in. Out of that $4 billion, $3.2 billion would be the employers, school districts, cities, counties, state, and $800 million would be the employees. So and Oregon is unique in that it requires, for many employees, 0% contribution to the system. I'm not saying going from 0 to 22% or 20%, but I am saying over time going forward, some money is going to have to be put in there. In addition, from the employees. In addition, we're going to have
I could just interrupt you there because I want to move on. We have to get to some other things here.
Dave, I think it's appropriate that
45 seconds.
Thank you very much. So I think my opponent leads you to believe that I created the PERS system and the deficit we have right now. That's not accurate. The decision was made, I think about the time I was in high school and college, and that set up the system that we had, the Tier 1 system. Secondly, the Oregon Supreme Court made a decision in June of last year that we have to keep our promises to retirees, to Oregon retirees. And I think we would all agree that we need to keep those promises, and that's exactly what I will do.
But Pierce, you said last week that you'd be releasing your proposed budget for the scenario in which Measure 97 does not pass this week. I have not seen it yet. I'm curious what cuts you would make in the absence of that new revenue.
Well, we've had a different kind of crisis in our campaign, so we've had that pushed back, and we do hope to release that next week, actually.
You're saying because of responding to domestic violence,
that was
you haven't been able to release the budget?
Absolutely, that was a crisis in the campaign.
Well, so what is your idea for how you would approach these kinds of cuts?
Well, again, cuts is in the eyes of the government, and the way government does budgeting. When you say, even in the scenario we have, that you go from 19 billion to 20.6 billion, and that's a cut. A cut to most of us means you have less revenue. Not that you don't have as much revenue as you think you need to do for existing programs. So we will lay out that budget. There are some priorities that have to be made. We're not planning on cutting anything in terms of spending from the last biennium, but we're not growing it as much as is needed for the presumptive maintenance of ongoing services. Because again, 19 billion to 20.6 billion general fund is not a cut in the amount of money you have. You say you need more money for existing programs, that's a different question. And again, but it's not a cut. I think that's where government always talks to us in a different way than we talk.
Cliff Thomason, your take in the big picture briefly on Measure 97.
Yeah, I oppose Measure 97. I don't think it's right that we, channel gross sales tax on 1,000 businesses where it's going to be spread out amongst 4 million Oregonians at an average cost of $50 a month. I think there's other ways. I alluded to earlier, having an honest discussion about moving forward with a proposal, including a sales tax, something that's fair. Consumption tax is something that's spread amongst everyone, where everyone receives benefits. And, it is something that doesn't necessarily work. There's only a few states that have a gross sales tax, and I think that we just need to look at another avenue for getting that.
And Governor Brown, we got this question from the audience. If Measure 97 does pass, how will you ensure the money is spent on its intended purposes, education, health, and senior services, all things that are mentioned in the ballot measure but are not required under the measure itself?
So I'm preparing 3 different budget scenarios, and one of them with the hopes of ballot measure 97 passing. And my budget will make sure that we spend the dollars from 97 as the voters intended. And the reason why I am supporting ballot measure 97, 3 things. Number 1, I believe we need adequate and stable revenue for key basic services like schools, like seniors, and like healthcare. I will tell you that every business person that I've spoken with believes we need more money on the table. Secondly, I don't see another viable option out there. And I would ask all of you what that might look like. Legislators and governors have wrestled with this for multiple decades in terms of getting more money on the table and stabilizing.
Cliff Thomason said a sales tax.
Yeah, well, I think that's where my opponent, Dr. Pierce, and I would both agree that that's not a concept that Oregonians would support. So, third, I think it's time in Oregon that corporations pay their fair share. My opponent, Dr. Pierce, would have you bear most of the full weight of paying for basic public services. Oregon has one of the lowest tax burdens for corporations in the country. Corporations pay more in Washington, and they pay more in California. And then lastly, Dave, I'd like to ask the audience and members listening, do you think that our school year is long enough? Do you think our class sizes are small enough? I don't. Secondly, do you think it's okay to kick off 400,000 Oregonians off the Oregon Health Plan and deny them access to health care?
All right, I'm going to stop you there
don't.
because we have time just for one last lightning round. This is either or question, some political, some not at all political. Please do just answer the question with one or the other. Cliff Thomason first, Hawaii Canyonlands, monument or not?
Not.
Not.
Needs to be a collaborative process before there's a monument.
Okay.
Well, my
Kate Brown, Beatles.
answer is better than their bad answers.
Kate Brown, Beatles or Stones?
Sorry?
Beatles or Stones?
Oh my gosh, Beatles.
Beatles.
We just need to come together.
Coast.
Coast.
Kate Brown?
Mountains.
Cliff Thompson.
Coast.
Cliff Thompson, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Dogs.
Not fair, I'm allergic to cats, so I'm dogs.
Okay. Kate Brown, plentiful salmon or cheap electricity?
Both, we can do both.
Bud Pierce.
Both.
Cliff Thompson, do you want to take a stand here?
We can and should do both.
Okay. Beavers or ducks? Cliff Thompson. We're in Eugene, I admit that, but beavers or ducks?
Yeah, I'm a believer, and my daughter's a beaver, so, you know, go Beavers.
Okay. Bud Pierce. Oh. Kate Brown.
I'm going to take Eastern Oregon. The women's volleyball team is going to win the national championships.
Okay. Bud Pierce, automatic transmission or manual?
Automatic.
Kate Brown.
Automatic.
Cliff Thompson.
Yeah,
Okay. Bud Pierce, backyard vegetable garden or backyard sauna?
Vegetable garden.
Kate Brown.
Vegetable garden, but I really love saunas too.
Cliff Thompson.
I'll take my vegetables in my sauna.
Kate Brown, voting mail-in or drop off?
Whatever people want to do, that's the joy of Oregon.
This is for you.
Mail in? Oh, for me.
Right, you have the ballot. Do you mail it in or do you drop it off?
I do both.
Bud Pierce.
Mail-in.
You can only vote once. You know that, though, right?
I change it up.
Cliff Thompson.
Well, she is Democrat, so maybe multiple votes. I dropped my vote.
Thomas, if you could only have one superpower, flight or invisibility?
Ooh, right now, invisibility.
Bud Pierce.
Light.
Kate Brown.
Harry Potter's invisible cloak.
Finally, Cliff Thompson first. Which political TV show, House of Cards or Veep?
You know, I don't have time for television.
Okay, Bud Pierce?
House of Cards.
And Governor Brown.
Beep.
All right, I want to thank all three of you, Kate Brown, Bud Pierce, and Cliff Thompson. Thanks very much. By the way, if you're not yet registered to vote or if you've changed your address, the registration deadline is October 18th. I'm Dave Miller. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll join you tomorrow.